And we are live now.
Boom, we are in. Who do we have with us? Scott.
I'm Scott.
Right, I'm Bart.
You're Bart. We're the Scotch Test Dummies, for those that are joining in. Also with us today from Tomatin Distillery in Scotland, you guys introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Scott also. I'm Scott Adamson, one of the sales guys, brand ambassadors here at Tomatin.
And I'm Scott Fraser, and I do the same job as him, only better.
And for purposes, because
I got that in early, I think.
Yeah.
I'm outnumbered 3-1, and we got 3 Scots here. So how are we doing? How are we going to distinguish between the 2 Scots in Scotland?
Well, in the office, it's Big Scott and Tall Scott or Wee Scott. I tried to not say Little Scott, but I am about twice his size. So.
It surprises people to find out that I'm over 6 feet tall and I'm still Little Scott in the office. So.
There you go. I'm 6'6". So how tall are you, Wee Scott?
Just about 6'1".
Okay, perfect. So we got the 2 Scots. Now, finish. I know we got to wrap the intro here. So
yes,
he's going to.
We got 2 today. We got Tomatin Dualchas. It's a hard C. It's not Dualchas. And Bocan. We'll take a look at both of them today. Bart, what are we going to do?
We're going to test it. Test it. That's a little yell thing I do. I know, it's great. So now with the 2 Scots, one of you lives on site at the distillery.
That's me. Yep.
Tell that story, brother. I want like a visual layout of how this distillery sits and how you nestle amongst it.
So the distillery was built about 120 years ago this summer. And back then, the distillery is in the middle of nowhere when you go back 120 years. So when they originally built the distillery, the decision was made to build some houses on site as well so that the workers didn't have to travel in what would have been a really tough journey. And as the distillery grew over the years, there were more and more houses added. And today we have about 30 houses on site. And around about 80% of the workforce still live on site as well, which is pretty cool. So if you come off the main road, you drive up past some of our warehouses, go under the railway bridge, and you've got a collection of whitewashed distillery cottages on the right-hand side, and I'm tucked right in there. So it's a 3-minute walk to work in the morning, which is pretty good.
That's delicious.
Yeah, and it means I can join you with the tasting tonight and not have to worry about driving home.
Yes. Drinking responsibly.
Absolutely.
Or irresponsibly when appropriate.
There you go. Now, Big Scott, let's say, how far away do you live from the distillery?
I live 30 miles north of the distillery. So the distillery is 15 miles south of Inverness, which is the main town in the Highlands. Well, it's a city now. And I live 15 miles north of that. But it's a 30-mile commute, and it takes me on a bad day 35 minutes and a good day 29. So it's not exactly the most populated, busy road in the world. So it's a good commute.
Got it. Now, we also, you guys are in the distillery. You're coming live from the distillery. Now, what room are you in? Because we can see what look like some great bottles behind you there.
Yeah, we're in our boardroom here at the distillery, which is part of the office. Another cool thing about Tomatin, our headquarters is on site as well. So we get to come from you straight from the boardroom. We would have loved to have taken you into the still house and stuff, but the internet in the Highlands of Scotland is still to be figured out. So this is the best we can do today.
Sure. Now looking, I see like at least a couple bottles that look fairly fancy. Are you able to mention anything about those?
Yeah, we've got some good ones. Scott's picking up now our 36-year-old Tomatin.
Woo! Wow.
Yeah, it's a beaut.
No, don't drop it.
We keep some pretty cool stuff up here as well. So we've got a nice bottle of 1967 Tomatin. We have a bottle that was done. I'll show you this one. So this bottle here, if you can see it, was bottled in 1997 for the centenary of the distillery. So we keep some things like that up here too.
Wow. And what I'll be quiet so we can see what you got there.
There seems to be a bit of a delay on the feed, I think.
Yeah.
You're good. Go ahead.
We were good. Bart started talking. The camera will focus on whoever's talking, and Bart was talking, so we couldn't see the bottles.
So it's a rewind. So this is the Tomatin 40-year-old. That's a sort of duty-free exclusive. It's only available in our duty-free outlets.
Wow. And I know you've got some bottles that you can only purchase at the distillery as well, correct?
That's right. Yeah, at the distillery, everyone's more than welcome to come here. We do a fantastic tour, and you get up to see some really intricate parts of the distillery. But when you get to the end, we have 5 casks in our visitor centre, and they're exclusive to people at the distillery to bottle for themselves and take something home with them that's a little bit different. So some pretty interesting whiskies as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's phenomenal. I know when we had Joanne McGinnis on, and her runner-up whiskey of the year was from Tomatin, and it was phenomenal. And that's what she had mentioned, that she actually got it while she was touring the distillery.
Yeah.
So just phenomenal. Scott, who do we have real quick commenting here? What do we got?
We got a lot of people already commenting, a lot of people joining in, excited to see Tomatin with us. Food Quig is here. Amy Woody, and maybe Amy's husband. Joseph Wasserman. Rombout is here. Jesse Boyson. Jack Longmere. Klaus Dobeltman.
Klaus. We got a lot of Europeans tuning in.
Yep. Scott Meskey. Dram Dude. Jason Whiskey Wise. Triple Cap. Jamie Beaver. Eric Gilbert. Jerry Bartlett.
Wow.
Lana. Brian Costello is here. Triple Cap, if I didn't say him.
Now, just so you know, with Amy had commented that she watches the show, but her husband, he ended up making some comments as well, and we only refer to him as Amy's husband. He does not get any.
I'm sure he loves that.
Yes. Yeah, we're just reversing it around.
Going by tonight's tasting, we can just call him Scott. I mean, the odds are that that's what's going to happen.
There you go. That'll be another Scott. Now, go ahead.
A few more. Patrick Van Elwoot is here. Dave Sosaby, Frank Lampard, right. George Kaplan, Adventures in Whiskey, Claire, Tyrone Cody, Tolv Thomas 12.
Wow.
Looks like about it. If I skipped Deep Ioy.
Yep.
Whiskey Oster Sick Eins Amerikaners.
Oh wow. Now you're gonna miss somebody and they're gonna hate you.
Yes. I apologize.
No, you're gonna miss somebody. Now wrapping it back in, and then we're gonna come back to some things and let you guys add whatever we've got going on. But can you kind of tell us what we're about to experience with this dram?
We better get some whiskey in our glass in order to do
go.
That. So in terms of what we do, I mean, one of the most important parts of making whiskey is the distillery character. So the new make spirit that we make at the very beginning of the process is hugely important to the style of whiskey that we're going to end up with in a bottle later on. So the first expression we're going to be tasting is Tomatin Dualchas. It's quite interesting. In the rest of the world outside the USA, it's actually called Tomatin Legacy. So you mentioned you've got a few viewers from Europe. They all know this whiskey is Tomatin Legacy. It is exactly the same whiskey. We just came up with a little trademark issue. This is our first. This was the first no age statement that we released from the distillery. What we've used in this is we've used first fill ex-bourbon casks and virgin American oak casks. So these are 2 casks that are going to give a lot of color and a lot of flavor really quickly into the whiskey. And it's going to complement beautifully the character of the spirit. So at Tomatin, we make a lovely, soft, fruity character of spirit. And then for this whiskey, we use first fill ex-bourbon and virgin American oak casks to give the flavors. So what you should be getting are some of those soft, fruity notes, a little bit of maltiness. Then you get a lot of some of those sweet vanilla notes, some nuttiness, and they come through from the first fill ex-bourbon and the virgin American oak. But when we're doing whiskey tastings, we're wanting everybody else's opinion, so it'd be good to get what you guys think as well.
Right, I definitely get the vanilla notes. I get a little bit of a floral note in here as well.
Yeah, you sometimes with Tomatin get a nice like heathery herbal note, and it just balances it out perfectly.
Yes.
A little bit of spice as well from the virgin oak coming through.
Now, let me point out, Dave Sosaby, he comments that the Tomatin Dualchas is the best value Scotch. And we,
Absolutely right.
Oh, we would absolutely agree.
Yes.
For those that don't know, or if you haven't seen the Dualchas, and this is your new bottling that you have with it. But in our area, this goes for $22 to $25.
Just phenomenal.
It's fantastic.
It's been designed with that in mind. A lot of times when we have no age statement whiskies, it's a lot of no age statement whiskies that came on the market were perhaps more expensive than the aged whiskey that they'd replaced. At Tomatin, we're just trying to use no age statements to complement our age range. We're always going to have the aged expressions in our lineup, but we've also got some other cool whiskies that we can play about with. I mean, using virgin oak and first fill ex bourbon only, it almost gives it sort of characteristics of North American whiskey. And that's precisely how versatile we want it to be. If people want to be mixing this in prohibition-style cocktails, drinking it on the rocks, it's supposed to be single malt whiskey that's approachable for people that are sort of a little bit worried about the category and worried how they're going to get into it all.
Yeah. When I'll get a lot of folks that are scared of Scotch in general because they've had an Ardbeg or a Lafroig, and they'll want to know, what can I have that's maybe a little bit lighter on the palate? And when I talk to them about the Dualchas or the Tomatin 12 and the maltiness that you can get, and then tell them about how affordable it is, I always tell them you can't go wrong, and they're just usually blown away because, again, it seems like, you know, maybe they were exposed one time to something very peated, and they think all Scotches are that.
Yeah. I think as well, with what we're trying to do with the legacy as well, it's something different in the range. We don't want to have a range of 5 or 6 whiskies that are just the same style of maturation at a different age. It gets, for us, a little bit boring. But what we've got with legacy, just to compare it to the 12-year-old, I like to think of the legacy as quite a modern style. As Scott was saying there, you get almost that North American influence. And I think Graham, the distillery manager, he quite often likes to call it a mid-Atlantic malt, which I think hits the nail on the head. Definitely a Scotch whiskey, but a lot of American influence there. Whereas the 12-year-old is your really traditional Highland single malt, a little bit of the sherry, dried fruits, nuttiness there. So you've got 2 great whiskies for people that are maybe new to whiskey, or even the guys that have been drinking whiskey for a long, long time. There's still enough complexity there in both the drams, and it just offers something for everyone, and that's what we like to do.
Yeah, this is opening up even as I nose it now, and I'm getting more of the maltiness. Now, with this Scotch in particular, have you noticed that it does open up and transition a little more as it breathes, or what's your experience level with that?
I mean, oxygen air is one of the most important ingredients in whiskey, and whether that's through the maturation process or while it's sitting in the glass, it's certainly going to have a change on what's in the glass. How big that is it depends really on the malt. I found myself, again, this just personally, something perhaps maybe more like our 14-year-old or our 18-year-old, which are the 14-year-old's been finished in tawny port casks for 2 years, 18-year-old Big Oloroso sherry finished for 3 years. They really react quite quickly with air, whereas with this, the changes are a little bit more subtle, but they're definitely still there.
I think sometimes as well the changes maybe come from you get used to some of the flavors there, and then your nose is looking for something new and something new. So that's pretty cool as well. I think with this one, you get a little bit more almost citrusy notes coming through. You get typical citrus notes with the Tomatin New Mix Spirit. And this starts to come through here as well, a little lemony, lemongrass sort of flavor as well.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Hey guys, Arash Nadi asks, are the new bottlings a sign that the juice in the various bottles is going to change?
No, it's exactly the same juice. We changed the packaging. It came around about this time last year. We started launching it into markets. And the idea was very much to have something that suited us a little bit more, that suited the whiskey. You've got some of the old packaging there in the background, and it looks pretty good, but I think the idea was very much that it was very cold, but we're quite a warm-hearted distillery. We love what we do. We love the whiskey in the bottle, and I think the bottle reflects that, and it reflects us as a nice, soft, delicate Highland whiskey. The whole point was to keep the whiskies the same. We've built up a great following by having some fantastic juice, so it only makes sense to keep that the same.
I agree. Yeah, your 14 port finished phenomenal. That's the very first Tomatin I ever had, and I was just like, wow. And then when I saw the 18, after having the 14, I went and grabbed it. And the sherry flavors and the transitions were in there, and the value for the 18. And he used to actually, didn't he used to like ask if I was getting paid by you guys because I would bring it up all the time.
Is that your sales pitch?
Yes.
Now we have those, like you saw those back there. That is the 14 and the 18 year. Both. Yep. And, well, let me say everything with Tomatin, reasonable, great value for the money. Right. Now, actually, the 14 is not available in our area.
That is true.
And we haven't seen it here in Kansas at all.
Yeah, we had a buddy in New Jersey that actually was able to source a bottle because we wanted to try it so much and get it out here. But I know in the States we've got that wonky 3-tier system.
Yeah, and then with the 18 year's been around, and it's always at $69.99 a bottle. It's a great value. It's a great Oloroso sherry finished Scotch. And there's been a lot of comments coming in on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've all been, with distribution in the United States, we use 2 companies. One's called Phillips Distilling and the other's called Johnson Brothers, and they pretty much cover all the states, and it just depends on their path within each individual state as to what eventually happens with the whiskey. And because the single malt whiskey is such a big category, not every single bottle of whiskey can go into every single state, because as I'm sure you two know, the United States is more like 50 different countries as opposed to just one big country for distributing in, which makes it interesting and fun. And a lot of the time when you crave something that you can't get, it sort of makes it a little bit more special when you do find it. But obviously, we want to take over the whiskey world afterwards.
You're sitting at the center right there, baby. Center. Now moving on to the tasting.
Yeah, the taste of this is fantastic. I mean, the first thing as well, it's just a really, really easy drinking whiskey. This is almost like a daily whiskey, something you can pull out with a couple of buddies playing a game of poker or watching some sports, and the bottle's going to be just about done by the time the game's finished, you know. But on the flavor, the flavor very much carries on from the nose. You get some more of the vanilla, still some of that citrusy fruit, some of that maltiness as well. It's almost buttery in its texture. You get a little bit of butter there. And yeah, just a fantastic drop. On the back of the tongue, there's a little bit of spice comes through as well. And then again, that's that virgin oak. I think the use of the virgin oak here has been pretty well done. Graham was explaining to me when we first started doing this that virgin oak acts a little bit like a tea bag. If you leave a tea bag in water for too long, the tea is going to become very bitter and very tannic very quickly. Same with whiskey and virgin oak, it can become too spicy and too sweet. But by mixing it with that first fill bourbon, it's just balanced it out perfectly well.
Now, hold on just a second. See Scott on the right, Big Scott. You got kind of choked up there when he started talking about tea bags.
No,
tried my hardest to hide it. The 4-year-old.
Family show.
Now, I get a wonderful.
Not the watershed in the UK either.
I get that wonderful mouth coating as well. I can feel it in the cheeks. And you're right, that lemongrass, that vanilla is present, definitely some of that citrus. And it's extremely light and feathery as you're sipping on it. And it's just a really good sipper. I've added 1 drop of water, and it just flows so smoothly and so softly.
It's all about just finding that balancing point with Tomatin Legacy. A lot of people like to just drink it straight up as it is, but then sometimes a little bit of water, and a lot of it depends on the climate, who you're drinking it with, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you're whether you've just got a promotion or you've just been fired. It depends what you want to take from it all, you know.
Depending on how this stream goes, we might find out what being fired's like tomorrow. So
Just don't mention any tea bags.
That's right. Yes.
We had a question come in about if there's any coloring added.
Well, the thing with this one is that probably 9 times out of 10 it is going to naturally look like this, so we don't have to. But occasionally you might find the bourbons come through a bit more and it's a slightly lighter color. And for some of our markets, consistency is a key. So we have to add a tiny little drop. The thing with that is we're whiskey geeks ourselves, and we know that sometimes from batch to batch you're going to get differences. But your mass market, it doesn't. And when you're saying that this is a great value whiskey for $25, yeah, it has to be accepted that that's going to be a mass market whiskey as well.
Yeah.
What we try and do with this, though, whether it's got a little bit of color or not, it's a fantastic drinking whiskey. And that's the key. If you close your eyes, you're still going to taste a great dram.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And
100%.
And that's what I say about people that get on colorant anyway, is taste the whiskey. Is the whiskey good?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now I'll point out on the website for Tomatin, and you guys have posted that Jim Murray in 2015 rated the Dualchas a 94.5.
Yeah, too low. It wasn't high enough.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Reach for the stars, you know.
94.5 for a $20, $25 whiskey is outstanding.
Oh yes, wonderful. Great entry level.
Now I do notice. I think the bourbon cask has a great influence on the Dualchas. Those vanilla notes and the citrus notes that are coming out. Or I mean, if this was a blind tasting, there's no way I would think that's a $20 bottle of Scotch.
Sure.
Quite honestly.
The thing that I love about Dualchas Legacy more than that is the little bit behind it. Graham Munson, when he first joined the distillery, was sort of tasked with coming up with this non-age statement whiskey that we could sell at that great value point. And he took to the idea with the people living on site and made a couple of recipes up and gave each of the members of staff a little sample bottle of it on a Friday night and said, take these samples home, try them with your friends and family over the weekend, and come back in on the Monday morning and tell me what your favorite was. So the coolest thing about the Legacy for me, or the Dualchas, is that the members of staff at the distillery actually picked the final recipe that's gone forward. So when we hear reviews like this, that it's a fantastic whiskey, it's the slightly romantic thing as well, but it's great for all the guys on site to hear that as well. They spend their week making this whiskey and very rarely get to hear people's opinions on it. So something like this is awesome.
Beautiful. Now, some questions for the guys on site. How many folks do you employ as a distillery, roughly?
Just over 50 people are employed by the distillery. Up until, I think it's about 54 to be exact now. It depends. It goes up and down with the amount of tour guides, because some work just seasonally in the summertime. But in the actual production side, you've got four men work in the mash house, 4 men work in the still house, and then about 8 in warehousing, 8 to 10 in warehousing. Then there's some management, office staff, salespeople. Then we've got Cooper. We've got our own Cooper on site as well, which is nice. Gives you ownership of your oak, which is nice. You're in full control of everything that you do. So that's, from that point of view, nearly everything that we do is on site here at the distillery. We do have a little office in Glasgow where 2 people work, because all of our bottling takes place down in Glasgow. So just in terms of logistics, it's a lot easier to work out of the Glasgow office for those 2. And then we've got 2 UK sales managers, one who's based in the central Scotland and one who's based in central England, who's just started. So
today's a cool wee time to talk about that, because on Friday we said goodbye to John Campbell. He's just retired on Friday there. He was our main forklift driver and one of the warehouse men at the distillery. But he'll be staying on site. He looks after the farm with all the sheep on it, so we'll see him still. But tomorrow we've got a new girl joining our marketing team as well. So it's always up and down. There's always people coming and going. But we've got a pretty good team here on site.
You do. My first contact was with Jennifer, and she was just great with the social media interaction that she and I had when we first started talking to you guys.
Yeah, she a few months ago, probably about a year ago now, she sent me an email saying, "Have you seen these crazy guys from America? They've done a review of Tomatin," and I just watched it and I couldn't stop laughing then. So this has been a long time coming.
That is
Jennifer
perfect.
watching this, and I missed it out when I listed all the staff, so I'll apologise to the marketing department just now.
No.
Everything together.
And that's part of our whole deal when we started is we were best friends. We enjoyed just drinking a dram on our own. And I kind of said, hey, you know, if we get 7 people watching, that's it. We're still best friends sitting down chatting and having a dram. I don't care if it's 7 or 40,000 as we're growing. And we just have a blast day in, day out.
It's such a good fun industry to be part of. I mean, the people that you meet, the places that you go, it's just fantastic. And most importantly, the whiskey you get to drink is
exceptional.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Yes. We had a question come in from Tyrone Cody. Can you ask the lads what casks they have available at the distillery now for bottling your own?
So we have 5 different casks available. We have one that's at the last check, it's about 13 or 14 years old. It's a PX finish. One's 13 or 14, they're about the same age, 13 or 14-year-old Oloroso full maturation, first fill. We have about a 12-year-old first fill ex-bourbon cask. We have a 4 or 5-year-old Virgin American oak cask, which is beautiful. Again, going back to what Scott was saying, with Virgin American oak, you don't want our whiskey to be in there too long. And we also have a 1990, so that's nearly 26, 27 years old. It's still early for it to be 27, but again, and it just gives it gives a full range of a lot of what we do here at Tomatin. All those whiskies are involved in our core range, and it's pretty cool to be able to taste them up here at the distillery.
You bet. Now, another question for living on site. I used to live in Colorado near the brewery that does Coors, and I worked a graveyard shift in my early 20s, and they would be up and brewing, and I could smell that mash coming through, and we would get some heavy snows in Colorado, and the whole area was permeated with this delicious smell. Do you get that up there at the distillery?
Yeah, probably not to the same extent, because we're definitely not using as much barley at the one time as Coors will be. But you find that when you come out the house in a really cold morning, when there's frost on the ground and they've just started mashing in, that's when you get it, because the heat's coming off the mash house and it's a nice sweet barley smell, which is cool because it comes back to some of the flavors you get in the whiskey. You sometimes as well, when we're making our peated whiskey, we only make that for 1 week a year. And it's around about December, so again, really cold outside, a nice smoked barley mash coming out, and it's totally different flavor. So yeah, amazing.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's a great transition into the Kubokan. We've got it poured. What should we expect on the nose here, gentlemen?
Hey, just real quick though, on the Dualchas, I don't know if we announced it or not. Someone asked on the comments. It is 43%.
Yeah.
And then so moving into the Kubokan now, it's bottled at 46%. I do see you label it that it is non-chill filtered as well.
Yeah,
That's right.
Now let me ask you something real quick, because on your website I see that you list the Kubokan under your other brands.
yeah.
That's right.
So we have this as a completely standalone brand. It's separate from Tomatin. There's still a little bit of a reference so that people see that it's from the distillery. But what we didn't want people for peated whiskey to become synonymous with the Tomatin brand. So that's the reason why we have set up this new brand. And as Scott was the person that researched the story, I'll let him tell the story about Kubokan, and then what I'll do is I'll tell you about the whiskey.
Yeah. So on the spot there, in a roundabout
good deflection.
in a roundabout 1742 time. The last wolf in Scotland was killed about 2 kilometres away from where we are now at the distillery. It was killed by a man called Donald McQueen. And this much is fact. This is proper history. He killed the last wolf in Scotland, and that was the end of it. But then, as time's gone on, we're a really small village here in the Highlands. The only thing you've got to keep you entertained is whiskey and folklore. And people try and outdo each other with the stories, and then someone comes along and says, yeah, I ran into a ghost dog the other night. And so there have been a few stories. We first heard one. The first story was a distillery worker out in the 1980s confronted by a big black imposing beast, and he reached out to touch its fur rather than running away. He maybe had far too many whiskies. He wasn't scared enough, and the dog evaporated into the air in front of him. And that's what we sort of went with when we bottled the whiskey. What's been cool since that is people have, we've had a couple of stories being passed on since the whiskey's been bottled. So around about a year after we first released Kubokan, a woman, there used to be a big hotel at the entrance to the village called the Freeburn Hotel. And she sent us a postcard of the hotel and wrote on the back that when she was a child, they used to stay there, and every night before she went to bed, she would see a black dog unaccompanied on the local bridge, and then it would disappear. And then there's another woman who apparently, I think it was one of the Stillman's mothers or something. She was cycling home the old railway station road, and a dog came and jumped at her and pushed her off the bike, and apparently it never belonged to anyone. So cool little stories like that. But it just goes back to sort of typical Highland folklore. We've all heard of like the Loch Ness Monster, and every small little village in the Highlands has either got a kelpie story, a stag story, or a dog story. And it just turns out that Tomatin's got Kubokan, which is Gaelic for the ghost dog or the spirit dog. Ku is dog, Bocan is slightly more hard to pin down, but it is like a ghost, a spectre, a spirit. But going to what Scott was saying about separating the brands, what's been cool about doing Kubokan as its own brand is it's not just one product. If we had peated Tomatin, it would be almost a one-off addition to the range. But the standard Kubokan is matured in a combination of virgin oak, bourbon barrels, and sherry casks. So over the period of a year and a half, we released the 3 individual cask styles, and we're still playing about, and we've got a lot of peated whiskey maturing in really interesting casks that should be coming out in a few years' time. So it gives us a little bit more room to have fun and play about and make interesting whiskey for people to try.
I love that, and I didn't know all that. So is there one expression of the Kubokan that's come to the States, or are we seeing different expressions around as well here?
So at the moment in the States, you have the original Kubokan, which is the Kubokan that we're all tasting just now. So that's the Kubokan in this bottle. You can see the apparition on the front of the label. We have done some special releases that I don't believe that these 3 special releases have come to the US. They were limited editions.
Nice.
We did. This tells a story about the whiskey, because we were not secretive about the whiskey, but we wanted to be able to sort of delay what we've told people about the whiskey. So in order to tell the story about the original Kubokan, we released these three different expressions. So one was fully matured in ex-bourbon, one was fully matured in virgin oak, and one was fully matured in sherry casks as well. So it just gives people a little bit of a glimpse into what goes towards making this original Kubokan. And with the original Kubokan, what you've got in here is you've got more layers of flavor than in any other Tomatin that we've released. So you've got, first of all, you've got the 3 casks. So you've got the virgin oak, the first fill ex-bourbon, and the first fill sherry. Then you've also got some refill casks as well. So the refill casks are casks that have been used a few times beforehand, and these just help to bind together these big flavors. They also give you some of that creaminess that you'll get in here. And the other flavor is peat. So every other Tomatin is completely unpeated. And in 2005, we started making peated malt on a regular basis intentionally here at the distillery. So for the last 11 years we've been making a peated expression of Tomatin. It started off very lightly peated, so the whiskey that you're tasting today will be somewhere between 12 and 15 ppm.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
So it's 12 to 15 ppm. At Tomatin, we've got really big, tall, thin stills. If you go on to some of our websites, you'll see some pictures of the stills. We also have a reflux chamber in there. So that just creates more and more reflux inside the still, which gets you different flavors coming across. So you might taste a 12 to 15 ppm whiskey that's more smoky than this. You might taste one that's less smoky. But what we feel that in the original Cabocan we get is a lovely earthiness coming through. There's none of the medicinal notes. There's none of the medicinal notes in there. And with all those different layers from all the different casks, it just sends your mouths in different directions. So beforehand, you asked me about the Dualchas when we were tasting that. Does it open up? Does it change with air? This changes within 2 seconds. So every time you go back to the glass, you're getting different flavors. And even when it's in your mouth, it dances across the palate. It starts off citrusy, then it becomes earthy, and then sweet, and then a big long finish. It's just, it's not a balanced whiskey like a 12-year-old, but that's the reason why we made it. We wanted to send your taste buds into different directions.
See, I love the experimentation you guys are doing, because when I first tried this, which was what, a year and a half ago maybe, I'm kind of a peat head. I mean, I love those high ppms. We're doing a lot with the Octomore and the Ardbeg Dark Cove and a lot of different Lafroig stuff. And so I think when I first approached it, I was expecting some kind of punch in the face peat, and it's much subtler than that. And I love what you're talking about. I didn't know about these, the other expressions you had in the back there. And I just love the experimentation that you guys are doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think with this as well, when you talk about peat, it's almost a very traditional way of using the peat in that it's been used to dry the barley rather than to make a smoky whiskey. And you've got a much more Highland style of smoke than you necessarily would from your Islay whiskies. There's not the medicinal side. It's not heavily smoky, but the peat comes across in that earthy, slightly burnt heather type of note there as well. And across the various additions we've done, the peat, although in the barley it is the same level, it's amazing how the different casks either shadow the smoke or bring it out a little bit more. So the sherry and the virgin oak, very, very heavily active casks, and you get more of the cask influence. But then something like the bourbon, you start to get more of the smoke straight away. So it's interesting to see what the cask does to peat as well as the distillation.
So these 3 different colored boxes, have you got plans to release those, or is there going to even be maybe a sample pack, or where are you guys headed with that commercially?
So that was what, 2 years ago now?
2 years ago, yeah.
So that was 2 years ago. So what the original Cabocan's no age statement. We didn't want to put the age on it. You can probably work it out when we released it in 2013 and first distilled in 2005. It doesn't take a mathematician to find out how old it is. But we also, just last year, we released the first 2 Cabocan vintages, which my beautiful assistant will go and get for us. So we had the first one was a 2005 vintage, which you see up on the screen here. So I don't know, this isn't quite available in America yet, but these vintages will be on their way eventually.
Hey, Big Scott, I don't know if you know, he just teabagged you with that.
Oh!
We're getting fired.
Usually I'm the one getting in trouble saying stuff.
I don't know what you mean, Scott. So pure and innocent.
Moving swiftly on, we actually got pretty lucky. When we first started doing the Cabocan and we released it in 2013, our production manager, Charlie, came over to the office with 3 sample bottles that said Tomatin 1989 on them, and he said, try this, and it was distinctively peated. We thought around about 25 to 30 ppm, and it turned out they were the last casks of a total accident. Back in the 1980s, we were still producing a lot of whiskey, and a batch of barley came to the distillery by accident. It was peated, it was meant for another distillery, and we decided then to distill it because you didn't want to lose a week's production. by having to send the barley back and get the new stuff out. Most of it was blended away over time. The background of Tomatin until around about 10 years ago, the majority of what we did was produce whiskey for the blended industry. So Tomatin whiskey was present in Johnny Walker, Dewar's, Shivers of Gal, Ballantine's, and it's only been recently that we've moved towards the brand and showing people what Tomatin's all about. But most of this batch of peated whiskey from the 1980s was blended away, but we found the last 3 casks and we were able to release this, a 1989 edition of the Bocan, which was fantastic. And people loved it, gravitated towards it. So we thought, how are we going to do this again without going back in a time machine and getting some more of that accidental peated stuff? So this year we released a Bocan 1988 edition, and that was 1988 Tomatin finished in peated casks, so from a distillery over in Islay, and we've got that there.
Yeah, we'd had questions come in on both of those, so I'm glad you addressed the 1989 and the 1988. So good timing there. Yeah, we do have a question. I don't know if you guys know it, if you've seen it. There was a movie, Donnie Darko, that apparently used your Bocan mythical beast.
It totally ripped us off. Luckily, the film wasn't successful as a whiskey.
Is that what that's from? Is that from your design?
No, we had a brand agency. Maybe they were inspired by it, but I've had people tell me in the past that the Bocan reminds them of Donnie Darko, but until you showed me that image, I'd never seen it before. It's quite similar, yeah. Yeah,
and that comes from Whiskey Throttle, and he'd been asking.
Okay, so he had the idea behind it was just to create this element of myth, because nobody's sure up at the distillery what Bocan actually is. So I mean, some people say it looks like a sheep, some people say it looks like a deer, some people like a dog. Obviously, Coo in Gaelic means dog, so it's just to play on people's imagination, which is what we want to do with the whiskey as well.
And it's dependent on how much whiskey you've had before you see it, what it actually looks like.
Definitely. Now, Arrow Y08 asked us to ask you, can you ask what percentage of the production that you guys do is for single malts?
It's a funny one, because we're producing around about 2 million litres of pure alcohol a year at the moment. Some of the whiskey that we produce is still for bulk sales to other companies. So even the difference between what goes to single malt, what goes to our blends, what goes to other people's blends, we probably keep around about half of what we produce for our own brands. Now, that can be the single malt, it can be for blends, it can be for trading with other companies for the whiskey we need for our blends, but around about half of what we produce is kept for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm deeply intrigued. I had no idea that Bocan went so deep. I love it.
There's so many different. There's so much. It's essentially something that we can play about with and have some fun. And I mean, keep your eyes peeled and see what comes out in the not too distant future. Obviously, I can't disclose too much, but it's
nobody's watching. You can say stuff that you never know.
I felt
this is off the record. This is off the record.
Dead teabagging and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we can tell you everything. We're already getting fired. So,
hey. North Shore Whiskey Club wants 2 questions here. Let me get them off. North Shore Whiskey Club wants to know if the Tomatin Distillery is operating at full capacity. At one time, they believe they were one of Scotland's largest producing distilleries. And then Frank Lampert has asked, do you guys feel that NAS whiskeys are here to stay, or will they go away when and if supply catches up to demand?
So to go on the first one, 1974. So after Prohibition ended in the States, I don't know why you guys did that, absolutely ludicrous. But anyway, so after Prohibition ended and after the Second World War ended, there was a massive boom period in Scotch whisky. Loads of distilleries opening up, a little bit like today, loads of Scotch distilleries being built, and the producers that were already there started expanding. Around about the 1950s, Tomatin had 2 stills, and we were probably capable of producing producing about 250,000 litres of alcohol every year at capacity. Between 1954 and 1974, we grew to the point where we had 23 stills. We had 2 mash tuns operating, and we were working around the clock. So 78 mashes, each of which was about 8 tons of barley, 23 stills operating non-stop. And that was giving us about 12.5 million litres of alcohol per year at capacity. So at that point, we were the biggest distillery in Scotland. The second biggest in the world after Hakushu in Japan. It was bigger. And if you do the calculations and things, if we had access to modern barley varieties back then, we would still have the record for the most whiskey ever made. We could probably have been making about 15, 16 million litres of alcohol with better yields from the barley. So we were a massive, massive distillery. And that was when everything was going to blends. We were almost working a little bit like a contract brewery. You know how you've got all these craft beer brands, but a few of them will be just making their beer at a certain brewery for 1 month of the year. That was pretty much what we were doing for the big blended companies. And as time went on, you got to the 1980s, which was a terrible period because people started drinking vodka, stopped drinking whiskey, and the sales of whiskey plummeted. So the demand from the blended whiskey industry on single malt Scotch like ours completely depleted, to the point that we went from being the biggest distillery in Scotland, producing whiskey 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to 10 years later, maybe making whiskey for 1 day a month. And we were in liquidation at the time. After we were bought over by Takara Shuzo, a Japanese company, we still produced whiskey for the blend market, not as much. But since probably around about the mid-1990s, certainly the early 2000s, the moves have been put in place to make a single malt Scotch rather than something for blends. And so that included removing some of the stills. It included trying to buy back a lot of the whiskey stocks that we had sold to the blenders over time. And we've been successful in that, and changing the way we distill as well. So Tomatin's a distillery that very much follows the trends of the whiskey industry as a whole. Opened in the boom period of 1890s, shut down in the early 1900s, grew massively into the 1970s, shut down in the 1980s, and now having success as a single malt brand. So we follow pretty much what's going on in the industry as a whole.
And with regards to the no age statement question, from Tomatin, no age statement is here to stay because we want to be able to taste as many different whiskies as possible. But the nice thing about working at a distillery like this is that we have aged whiskey, which is going to be available for a long time. We've put plans in place in order that we have whiskey that can be released as no age statement right the way through to, well, at the moment we've got a 36 and a 40-year-old in core ranges. We have a 44-year-old special release that we just did in a Warehouse 6 collection, and in the not too distant future we'll have some much older whiskey than that as well being released. So it's an exciting place to come to work because you get to see everything from the very beginning right to the very end.
Wow. Yeah, that's extremely impressive. So we get a little feedback.
Yeah, that just started.
Oh,
no, go ahead. Well,
now
it's cleaned up. Good. One of the questions I had too is, have either of you had family that worked at the distillery, you know, back in the old days, or are you guys both like first generation?
I am first generation from my family. My background is I grew up in a small village called Evanton, which in whiskey geography terms is around about a 5 to 10 minute drive from Dalmore and Tanninic Distillery in Alness. The only member of my family that's ever worked in whiskey before was my grandfather. He was a warehouseman at White and Mackay in Invergordon at the grain plant. But other than that, I was completely new. I came from a studying Scottish history background into the distillery to research their history, and then never let go. I got hooked.
Beautiful.
With regards to me, I suppose I'm technically second generation, but my dad actually started in the industry after me, so but not working at Tomatin. It's probably I'm the only person that it goes the wrong way around with. Over the last year he's just got a job working over in a new distillery project that's taking place in Skye. So they're in very much the infancy period of production. But I come from a long line of farmers, and I live on the Black Isle, which is a famous barley growing region, and 85% of what we do on the farm where I still live is growing spring barley for single malt whiskey production. So it's that part of it that I've always known what's happened, and I've worked in distilleries since I was about 20 years old, as doing various different things.
I don't know about Bart. I don't know about Bart, but I am at least a third generation whiskey drinker.
Yeah.
I think we've got that coming through a long line.
I can account for 3 anyway, probably more.
Yeah, that is the cool thing about Tomatin, not necessarily from us, but there are some families that have this massive, massive tie to the place. So if you were to phone the distillery, for example, our office manager and receptionist is a woman called Rose Bartlett. Her husband, Bruce, is one of our warehouse men. You'll find him on the forklift. And their son, Alan, is our head cooper here at the distillery as well. Another one is Colin Campbell, one of our warehouse men. His father worked at the distillery for 53 years. Dougie Campbell, a lot of people will know the name. The Tomatin Decades was bottled for him. He was the distillery manager before Graham Unson. So you've got loads of these families. Our stillman and our lab technician are brothers, and their cousin is the mashman. All these things going on.
Now, we had a question come in.
Tyrone is asking, do you plan on any special bottlings that make use of your Japanese connections, i.e. Mizunara oak aged?
Not necessarily Mizunara, and not necessarily anytime soon, but we do have some of our spirit maturing in Japanese sochu casks. Again, it's one of those things we like to do. We've got the cooperage on site, which gives us the ability to play with loads of different styles of casks. So this is partly because of our Japanese connection. They're a massive sochu and sake producer. So there's that link as well, but it comes more from our drive to do cool little things. So last year we released a 9-year-old fully matured in Caribbean rum casks. We released a 14-year-old finished in Cabernet Sauvignon cask. So we're always looking at what inventory, stock inventory we have, and at the start of the year we'll decide what we want to bottle that year, and we'll go with it. So we get to play about quite a lot. And luckily for myself and Scott, we quite often get to sample the casks.
Yeah, there's a side benefit there.
Yeah.
Hey, 2 questions real quick. One is from me. Do you have any plans of making a more heavily peated Scotch? And Frank Lampert is asking, not including Tomatin, what are your favorite whiskeys?
Oh, that's a hard
question. So to what Scott was saying, we are currently now producing 30, 35 ppm Scotch whiskey. 2 things you can do there. You can either use that in a few years' time for a heavily peated whiskey, or we can mix it with non-peated Tomatin to produce more of the Bocan. So we've got the same liters of alcohol, but because we can mix it with non-peated, you can make more of it effectively. But yeah, we are producing heavily peated whiskey. When and in what guise that comes out remains to be seen. You'll be the first to know.
There you go. There you go.
You can tie him down to that. That's a contract. Contract's legally binding in Scotland.
Especially the heavily peated.
What's their favorite whiskeys?
Oh, favorite whiskeys not from Tomatin. If that doesn't get you even more trouble.
We know your favorite whiskeys are Tomatin.
Yeah, number 1, 2.
Without a doubt.
So
without a doubt.
Your 31st favorite whiskey.
Someone brings you a bottle for your birthday or for Christmas, and it was good. You know, what kind was it?
I think a lot of it depends on other distilleries. So I've worked at. I worked at 2 other distilleries. I worked at Glenard Distillery in Muirvord, which is the village I grew up in. So I love the whiskey from there. I also did a few weeks at Clynelish Distillery up in Brora, so I love the Clynelish single malt whiskey. To take away from the Diageo, I mean, who else do I like? the list is endless. It depends on the time of the day, but I love what Bruichladdich do. I love what Glengoyne do. They're two of my favourites and completely different and versatile whiskies. I love all the smoky whiskey. I think the smoky whiskey has got its time and its place, and that's what I initially loved. I think the first bottle of whiskey I ever got was a bottle of Ardbeg, you know, so that was what I fell in love with. But it's finding everything else down through the category, all these obscure little Speyside distilleries that you only get an independent bottling of. That to me is a treat. It's about discovering new things. And I love whiskey from all over the world: bourbons, Australian single malt, Japanese single malt. Some of the European stuff's getting better as well.
So now that Scott has named every other whiskey in the world, try and be a bit more specific.
Not to be totally impartial. Maybe it says something more about my consumption than anything else.
Right. Yeah, that was like 31 through 63rd.
Yeah. So we're very lucky with the job that we do, that we get to travel the world, meeting people from other distilleries and trying the whiskey they've got, and not necessarily having to pay for it, which is awesome. So for me, a lot of it is dependent on who I've managed to make friends with. So like the Arran Distillery, I love their whiskey. It's quite similar in style to Tomatin as well. Whiskey's a acquired taste, so if you find something you like, I tend to find that I like similar spirits. So Glenmorangie, for example, Balblair. Other ones, just some cracking drams from Bunnahabhain, fantastic whiskey. Canadian whiskey, I love Canadian rye, like Lot 40, Stock and Barrel. They're coming out with some awesome rye whiskies.
It's Jim Murray too.
Where's my hat?
Hey, now I commented in the comments because Bart just took his third pour of the Bocan.
No.
I don't know if you guys noticed. I've had to refill his glass 3 times.
He was pouring me light.
Now, we had the Bocan, as Jesse points out, in 2015 and reviewed it. Now, I can tell you it was good, but Bart, you were a little disappointed because it just wasn't as peated as you were expecting. What's your thoughts today?
2 things. I think coming at me then was I was really a peat head at the time. So when I'd heard, oh, there's peat in this, I think I was much more of a novice even then, but I expected this like, oh, it was going to be, you know, a peat punch in the face, and it's a subtle peat. And what's really intriguing me here is even as I've sipped on, I don't know, maybe my third drink here.
Just roll. He's on his first.
Hey, okay. It's 9 o'clock at night in Scotland. Just go for it.
There you go. As I was sipping on it, what you had said was exactly true, that a lot of the peat was layered underneath in the, not just in the aftertaste, but it was kind of catching me on the back end of the dram, and I was really trying to work through the transitions. And you were 100% right when you were saying that it really does travel and open up even as you're sipping on it, with or without water. So that's intriguing me at this point.
That's precisely what we wanted to do. You want to start questioning yourself. What have I tasted there? Because it's different whiskey. You know, it's not your traditional style, which is pretty cool.
You're right. And then I'm like totally geeking out on the fact that I'd never even seen those other colored boxes. And then you've got the 88, and I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, I'm very excited about this because I'll quite honestly, I mean, we are the Scotch Test Dummies. I didn't realize the depth that you had here, and that you called it the Bocan to break it away, so it wasn't just a peated Tomatin. This thing has no walls on it. I mean, you can move this and play with it so much. It's really exciting.
Exactly, and it's quite funny as well. You know, Bocan, the standard and the first 3 limited releases were all non-age statement whiskies, and normally when you release a non-age statement whiskey, there's a little bit of the backlash as to, are we hiding things from you? The amazing thing about this was with those first 4 whiskies, people were just so happy about how diverse they were, what we were doing, that we were experimenting so much, that the fact that they never carried an age statement almost didn't seem to bother them, you know. And like you say, it's that depth. We've got some awesome casks sitting there. And that's what we try and do. Just have a little bit more fun than, like you say, this is sort of pulled the restraints off, and it can be something that a typical traditional Scotch whiskey brand cannot be. It can do those things.
Now, I do want to ask you, I think Scott's got some questions coming in, but I've got to hit in. We kind of hit on how whiskey reached out to you guys and how you guys came into whiskey, but just a little more detail on that question. What kind of was your first exposure to Scotch or whiskey in general, and how did that send you down the path where you guys are?
Not good. Not good at all.
Don't ask people from Scotland that question. That can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So, drinking responsibly at a young age, I found myself playing football with my uncle and some family on a beach on the west coast of Scotland. And it was the typical shirts for goalposts sorts of things. I should say soccer for the American viewers.
Sure.
But we ran out of shirts, so my uncle used his hip flask as one of the goalposts. And halfway through, a young kid that I was, a little bit out of breath, running up and down on the sand, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get some of that water over there. Open the flask, bosh, back it goes. And that's when I had my first taste of Lafroig. So on that day, when I found out what it was, I said, I'm never going to drink whiskey ever again in my life. So here we are, a few years later. My first good experience was in a bar with one of my mates. We had a few beers, and we got to the bar and had a nice gantry and said, okay, let's have a whiskey. And it was a Jura that I had, and it was the first time that I tried a whiskey and thought, yeah, I want to know more about this. And then started going to tastings, opening up my senses and the range. It was the total difference between one whiskey to the next that got me hooked.
All right, we had one.
The other Scott.
Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Scott.
My first experience of whiskey, of single malt whiskey, certainly was. I'm quite a big chap, as you can see, and I was involved in the Isle of Skye Highland Games, and we won a bottle of Talisker for winning the tug of war. So that was my first bottle of whiskey that I got. Of single malt whiskey, but then even just that just got me hooked even more after it. So once you can get the different layers, you really find out what it was.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, Scott. Here, local Scott. What was
we talked about this before we went live, and we had a question come in. What is the correct pronunciation of Tomatin?
You nailed it first time. Tomatin. It comes from the Gaelic language. Gaelic was a spoken language. It wasn't written down until sort of 1600s, 1700s, and because it was a spoken language, obviously there becomes different interpretations of how you say things. It depends on what region it goes from place to place. In Gaelic, Tomatin Tom means hill, and Atin means juniper bush, so it's hill of the juniper bush. So we should have actually been making gin on site at the distillery. But the tie back to Atin and gin is that juniper is that when you burn juniper, it doesn't give off any smoke. So in the local area, there's been lots of illicit stills from the 1400s onwards. So people would have been burning all this juniper bush underneath so that they wouldn't get caught by the excise man as they came round to check from still to still. So there's no juniper bushes left in the distillery, the hill beside the distillery. So it should be Tom and Atin. But
Oh dear.
Whiskey Life is asking, I don't know which Scott he's referring to, one of you two. Are you planning on being in Munich this year for the Free Spirits Fair? Was one of you there last year?
That is Germany's one of the markets I look after. I wasn't there last year. I was there 2014 and 15. I'm not going to be there this year either, sadly, but I will be in Nuremberg in the middle of March, I think, and then in Limburg at the end of the month as well. Two fantastic whiskey shows. Limburg especially is a fantastic, fantastic show for people that want to try all sorts of whiskey. We've got some great master classes lined up as well, but sadly not Munich this year.
All right, and another.
Yeah, did you see Jesse's? No, real quick. Jesse is asking. We'd asked a prior guest this. Right now, the building that you're in catches on fire. You're running out. You can grab one bottle off of the shelf behind you. What do you grab?
Tomatin 36-year-old, and I push Scott out the way and take the Tomatin 40-year-old as well.
You take his too.
Make it look like a clever accident. No, Tomatin 36-year-old for me.
I would agree with that, but what I would do, because Scott's got that bottle, I'm going to grab something much cooler. I'm going to grab this.
This shows how much of a whiskey geek this boy is.
So this, in 1909, Tomatin was reopened by two families from England, and that big book that I showed you there is the warehouse record from 1909 to 1923 of every cask we filled. So when Scott's taking the bottle, I'm taking some light reading with me.
Wow.
So you don't follow instructions. Noted.
No, I like him. That's what he's big into the history. That's very unique. You got to save it.
Yeah.
All right, now favorite movie.
Casks out on site. I mean, if this building goes on fire, we've got 14 warehouses filled with whiskey. We'll be fine.
There you go. Now, favorite movies. You guys, what's your favorite movie all time?
100% Top Gun, greatest motion picture ever made.
You like the volleyball scene.
I do. It's my favorite. How can you tell? I thought that's what this was all leading up to.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Is it not?
That was a great movie.
With my serious hat on, I would say Shawshank Redemption. But as for me, the best film to sit down and watch over and over again, Cool Runnings. There is no better film.
Really? Very good. Now, I don't know Cool Runnings. Tell us
either.
something about Cool. I know all about Shawshank. We got the sisters that were in Shawshank, Andy, but tell us about Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings is the story of the Jamaican bobsleigh team that got its way to the Calgary Olympics in 1988, and it's just a fantastic family comedy film that tells that story in a fantastic way. Really great story. But I'm seeing Boba Fett sitting next to you there, and anything Star Wars as well. Yeah.
Now, real quick, also, you're so Scott on the left. You live at the distillery. And you're in the boardroom here or the conference room. Yep. And all of these whiskeys are behind you on the shelf. Are they opened up? Can you sample from them at any time, or how does that work?
No, some of them are open. We don't often sample from the ones in here because we're always getting cool little cask samples coming across our desk as well. We do a program whereby if you're a store, a whiskey club, even just a person with plenty of money, you can come to us and bottle your own Tomatin cask. So as wearing our sales hat, these cask samples quite often come across our desks and we get to try those as well. And what's really cool as well is once we've sold that cask, we've still got this sample left. So every few months, we'll pour them together and make our own sort of in-house blend of whiskey all the way back from 76 to 2007. And it goes in the golf bag under the name Various Artists. So,
wow.
The artist formerly known as Prince.
Yeah.
Wow, very impressive. Great answer.
Are you looking for a roommate?
Yeah.
That's a valid question.
Well, with all the teabagging going on, I don't think that's a good question at all.
I don't know how happy my wife would be, but you're more than welcome to come for a dram.
Hey,
probably very.
Real quick, just to go back to the Bocan, and I can tell you this: there's a lot more sherry coming out today than I remember in the past. And I didn't even know there was a sherry cask influence with it. But really, it seems like sherry is in the forefront with it. There's a little bit of a bourbon casking with some vanilla and citrus notes, and then just a hint of the peat.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally agree.
Nailed it. So that's exactly what it's all about. It's about just having these different casks, and different times you'll taste these different casks more prominently. It totally depends on what your taste buds are like.
Now, real quick, we also have the whiteboard. Has anybody hit your quote? Scott always throws a quote up on the board here from a movie. What is that? Top Gun?
Yeah.
Either one of the Scots, you know that movie that quote's from?
Can you guys read it?
Is somebody chasing you, Sheriff?
Yeah.
As you probably saw by my answer of Top Gun, my knowledge of movies is pretty low. But if you want to talk about golf and rugby and maybe a little bit of basketball, I'm good.
I have no idea.
That's Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh.
So the next line is, "Ain't nobody chasing me, boy."
Wow.
Yeah, Sheriff Buford T. Justice.
Wow. Well, cool. All right. Hey, any questions from you guys to us or all the viewers? Anything you want to know?
What's your favorite films?
Star Wars.
Well, yeah, we're unfortunately, like, I remember my parents taking me to a couple Herbie the Love Bug. I remember seeing Fantasia, and I remember thinking these kind of suck. And we had moved from the flatlands of Kansas to the mountains of Colorado right as Star Wars came out. And I was seeing kids playing with the figures already, and I started even buying the figures before I saw the movie. And my biggest memory was just begging to go see it because my neighbor next door had seen it 3 times already, and I was 7. And what I didn't realize at the time, I mean, I knew my mom was 8 months pregnant. We go down to Denver. We're standing in this line that's wrapped around the building, and it's starting to move, and we're almost ready to get inside. And she starts, now I get it, but she starts saying, "I think we need to go home. I can't stand here anymore." And I remember like uttering some 7-year-old, like, "We can't leave now." And it was one of those deals where I was told I'd better shut up or I would never see it. And then I got in there and that movie opened up and I was just amazed. So Star Wars has been by far my favorite movie. I mean, it was just, it was the first time I was kind of transfixed while in a theater. So, and then you on Golden Pond?
No.
He's a big Jane Fonda fan.
Magic Mike.
You can tell.
Yeah.
A couple questions come in about me and Bart's ratings on these and if they've changed. I don't believe so. Both of them an excellent value. The Dualchas.
No, mine has.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. The Dualchas, we both gave a 89.
Right.
I would keep it up there.
Delicious.
It's high 80s. We both like it. And for the $20 to $25 price range, it's unbeatable.
Right.
The Bocan.
Yeah.
Now we talked about that. You're on your third pour of it today, so I think you probably come around a little bit on it.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to the peat fans that really dial into my peat sensitivity, it's not. I mean, it's not, and I think that's where I went wrong. I came into it thinking it was going to be this peat explosion, and it's back in line with Tomatin 18 and 14 and even the 12, that it's got these transitions, these subtleties to it. So to me, it's more of a subtle whiskey with a peat influence. And approaching it that way definitely changes where I approached it, a year and a half ago when I was expecting, oh, this is going to be your guys' peat punch. And the transitions are subtle here, but I'm still, even working through them now. So yeah, this is and I'm really, really excited about what you guys are doing with it. In a dummy sense, I didn't know all the things that were going on with Bocan.
Excellent.
Cool.
That's what it's all about. It's all about just finding out more about the brand, and it's probably where we've got a lot of work to do, is to really tell people about it. But it's very much in its infancy. It's only been around for 3 years, so we're hoping to really push on with this brand and get people tasting a lot more of it. I must say, I mean, in the visitor centre, Bocan's our second biggest selling whiskey, the original Bocan, and that's when people have a choice of 20 different whiskies. So we're hoping to one day reach those peaks worldwide, and with your help, we'll get there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you guys are delivering top notch. I've been saying for years. I mean, I refer people to Tomatin all the time. You guys really have the craft. I mean, obviously you got hundreds of years of experience, but it's really, you're putting out phenomenal juice.
I'm glad you like it. Thank you very much. Always nice to get compliments.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. Anything else, Scott, coming in before we go?
I would just touch on a couple comments we had before the live stream had even gotten started on Twitter. Or as it got started, there were several people that had mentioned that they'd never had a Tomatin. Or hadn't. There was even one person whose liquor store didn't carry it. And when they asked about it, the liquor store said, "Who?"
Oh, boy.
You know, referring to the distillery.
They need to get in. They need to get in now.
All of the Tomatins that we've had have been great values, excellent on the palate. Hopefully that trend continues. Some people were commenting they were worried that after this live stream, you guys may try to raise the prices.
It's already in the budget. That's why I've been looking at the other screen.
It won't be us. It'll be the people that take our jobs.
Whoever replaces us doing that.
You guys will be out drinking tea.
The tea ambassadors for the north of Scotland. There's some in Boston Harbor, I think.
Still good. Anything else, brother?
No, I think that's about doing it. I mean, do you guys got anything else that you'd like to add?
I think we've covered most of the bases, but thank you very much for having us. I'd probably just like to add as well that we do tours up at the distillery, so anybody that ever wants to visit, we've got a great selection of tours available up here where people can taste various different expressions of what we're doing, from our single casks in the visitor centre, right the way through to everything in the core range and our special releases. But thanks everyone for their support, and Slàinte. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Slàinte.
Yes, cheers. Thank you guys very much. Thank you very, very much.
Well, and thank you to, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up then.
Yep.
Thanks to everybody that joined in today. Great show. We had good numbers, good comments coming in. Wish we had time to address them all. We'd be here for another 6 or 7 hours. So
another 4 of these.
Yeah. And we'd need another.
That's not a bad place to be.
Not bad at all.
But so yeah, thanks to everybody that joined in,
and here's what we're going to do. We're going to scotch it, you Scotch gods.
Cilantro.
Dummies.
Cheers, chaps.
Cheers, guys.